It's the fifth game of the World Championship match between world champion Magnus Carlsen and the challenger Fabiano Caruana. Today, Caruana with the white pieces opened with his customary e4, and Magnus once again plays this line of the Sicilian with knight c6. Interesting, he's not switching his openings. He obviously has so much confidence in this opening that he's prepared to, well, just face any novelty that Caruana can throw at him. So we're still wondering what Magnus has up his sleeve against the open Sicilian, but Caruana repeated his bishop b5 of game 1 and 3. Now here, in those games I mentioned, Fabiano took on c6. Today he played castle's kingside. Just before we move on to the game, let me just show you a very old game between Fischer and Spassky, played in their rematch in 1992. Now, of course, d takes c6 we've seen already in this match, but Spassky played b pawn takes bishop, and then we saw a fantastic game from Bobby Fischer using this sacrifice of the b pawn. And, well, the game fantastically complicated. Just bear that in mind, this b4 sacrifice. So, in our game, in our fifth game of this match, Fabiano played castle's kingside. Now rook e1. Now, a couple of ways for blacks to play this. Normal is knight f6, and then e5, knight d5, and so on. And that's been quite a popular variation. But Magnus played e5, which in a sense is more uncompromising, because you're staking a claim in the center. You're ready to play knight e7 and castle's kingside, and later on maybe even f5. I'm really going for it. But Fabiano decided to react very quickly and played pawn to b4. Now it is a bit different from that Fischer game that I showed you a moment or two ago. Carlsen has actually faced this a long time ago in 2005, and he played pawn takes pawn, which is the most popular continuation in this position, and then a3 with interesting compensation, because white gets pieces out very quickly. And if you have a look, Caruana's king is nice and safe. Carlsen's king is still in the middle when he's fighting fire on the queen side. That's what this whole idea is about. b4 stirs up trouble while black's king is still in the middle. This is the idea. But Carlsen played, well, first of all, he did lots of face pulling and was got, like this, as if he was trying to remember, what he'd analysed. And he played knight takes, which is less usual than pawn takes pawn. Bishop b2. Fabiano was playing these moves very quickly. Now, if the knight comes back, then white can take here and take on e5. So this is the threat to take here. a6. Now, if the bishop were to retreat, let's say bishop c4, then black can get away with retreating the knight, defending this pawn, and actually it could be worse. Black is fine here. So after a6, Fabiano played a3. Now if the knight were to retreat, we can exchange and then take on e5. Now, having knocked out an important centre pawn, then white can look to the future with confidence. So after a3, this was taken. Rooks exchanged. And here, very interesting situation. One of the deputy arbiters at the match is Nana Alexandria, famous woman player. And she had this position as white in 1969. That's incredible. So it must have been very funny for her to be watching on, knowing that she'd played this position in 1969. And I mentioned it to her afterwards, and she went, "Yes, my game." She remembered it. Fascinating stuff. So, what goes around comes around, it seems. Well, Alexandria's opponent played pawn takes pawn, and she was better. Nana was better in this position. White is obviously better. Very nice pawns, important centre pawn knocked out. So Magnus played d6, so that's important. That e pawn was under fire, and this d pawn protects. But hang on, after pawn takes pawn, doesn't this undermine black's protection of e5? Well, of course, it's not necessary to take. Carlsen developed a knight, so he's ready to bring his king to safety. Now, this has been played before, and if white is content with a very slight advantage, maybe symbolic advantage is the way to describe it, then this could be played. But black is really solid here. So, for example, if we go into this endgame, and this is a plausible continuation. Now, of course, with double pawns here, you could say this is white's structure is slightly better than black's, but actually, this bishop can come out very easily somewhere along here. Maybe knight c6 first. I mean, this could possibly be a weakness at some moment, maybe after b4 fixing it, and maybe just attack the e pawn as well. Basically, black is fine there. So instead of taking here, Fabiano played queen e2, attacking the pawn. So b4 played by Carlsen. Now if check, then the knight actually holds the pawn, everything is fine. That knight protects here. So queen c4 played. Now this is a really interesting position, and Fabiano was playing extremely quickly, so he must have prepared this very well. If black's not careful, then this queen is going to take another pawn, and things are looking good. Queen a5 played by Carlsen. Now, slightly unusual move, hitting the bishop, but allowing pawn takes pawn. Now, you don't want to take that in the corner. Then this is looking really pleasant for white. And material is, let me see, well, sort of even. But you can see black's king is going to be stuck in the middle of the board. Let's go back. Bishop e6 played instead. And the queen has to come, well, it has to come there, really. The queen is in a little bit of difficulty. I guess it could retreat here somewhere, but this knight could move. And it's annoying for white that this bishop is attacked. Another problem for white is that this knight is dominated actually by the pawn. So queen c7, going into an endgame. Knight c6, no panic, that's important to be able to defend that pawn with bishop and knight. And now the king comes across just to take that pawn. Now, here's where Fabiano thought for something like half an hour. I mean, maybe he'd sort of roughly got this far in his home analysis and thought, well, I'm a pawn up, it should be better for white. But clearly the more he looked, the more he realised that it's black that is absolutely fine in this position. Even though black is a pawn down. In fact, sorry, let me just come back. In fact, two bishops give black decent compensation. Also, the rook is on the open file as well, ready to speed down the board to attack any weaknesses that turn up. And this b pawn is a slight problem, has to be said. Now, d3 played. Now, if black wants to get somewhere, then maybe b5 is the move to fix that pawn, but still. As Carlsen said after the game, it's such a narrow path that black has to tread in order to try for any kind of advantage here. That, well, he basically wasn't convinced that he had anything more than equality. He played king b6. Now, if white develops in a standard way with knight d2, then the rook comes down, and that's a little bit uncomfortable. So bishop d. This is very interesting play from Caruana. So he thought for a very long time here, and made sure he got it right. So bishop d2 played. Rook d8, which appears uncomfortable for white. Attacking this pawn. If the rook comes up, then bishop h6. But Caruana had worked this all out. He actually has a forcing sequence in order to liquidate into a drawn endgame. So first of all, check. Well, the king has to come down the board. Normally you'd want to do this, but there's a little tactic that white has. This is a forced continuation with these checks. And here's the tactic coming up. Well, you call it a tactic. Rook b1 check. I mean, it's more just very well calculated by Fabiano here. So the point is that after king here, rook takes pawn. Knight here, attacks the rook and defends the pawn. Rook check, king takes. Now black is a pawn up. However, this rook is so active on the 7th rank that black has very little prospect of realizing this slight material advantage. So let's just see how things went. King f1. That's a tricky move, taking away this square from the king. And sometimes black can even fall into a kind of mating net here. That's why h5 was played, actually, to prevent g4, which would take away the king's retreat. Oops, the king's retreat here. h3. I mean, there are various things that white can try. Now, Carlsen decided to just bring the king to safety, even if it meant giving up this f-pawn. And of course, with more pawns being liquidated, I'm afraid it's going to be nothing else but a draw. If pawn takes pawn, well, we'll just move the king back, the rook away, and, well, with completely even material, pawns on the same side, of course, it's bound to be a draw. So, in fact, they agreed a draw in this position after 34 moves. So, honours even still. 5 games played, 5 draws. When is the deadlock going to be broken? Who's the more comfortable from this game? I think Magnus, actually, because Fabiano's initiative just kind of fizzled out fairly quickly, and Magnus played a really accurate game there and managed to turn things around so that it was he who had just a little bit of initiative. I know many of you will be howling with protest and another draw, but this is the nature of World Championship chess and match play, actually, where you poke and probe, trying to find a weakness in your opponent's opening repertoire. And a lot of it is guesswork. You're kind of shooting in the dark. I find it fascinating. You know, will Magnus persist with the Sicilian? Will Fabiano persist with bishop b5? Will he go for an open Sicilian? You know, all these questions in the air in this kind of match. Thanks for watching. If you're not a subscriber, then click down there. That's free to subscribe. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, then do check out patreon.com/PowerPlayChess. Again, you can see the link up there. And if you want to support us with a one-off donation through PayPal, you can do that as well. Again, just click on the links above. And of course, look at the various playlists I've got there. A Caruana playlist, a Carlsen playlist, and so on. Thanks very much for watching.